All right, welcome back to another video in my cloud series. Today we're going to go over cloud resource capacity planning. Just going to be a general overview of capacity planning, nothing too intrusive or anything, just some cloud capacity planning factors, as well as cloud density, load trends, and performance planning. So let's actually get started here. Just a moment. All right, so down there. Now, first, I'm going to get started with investigating Microsoft Azure pricing calculator. So let me go ahead and open up Microsoft. Now, with creating resources using a cloud provider, it always involves the cost, right? And companies need to assess the cost involved when planning to migrate resources to a CSP. So upon creation of a resource, right, the subscription will be charged according to uh, according to actually, I have to make sure this is right. All right, so they need to assess, sorry about that, they need to assess the cost involved when planning to migrate resources to a CSP. So when you create it, they'll be charging it according to the consumption of like a pay-as-you-go kind of thing, right? Methodology. So what I'm going to do is actually take a look at the pricing calculator to investigate the costing involved in the hosting of resources on the Azure platform. So let's click there, right? And see if cookies will pop up. So I'll just actually really quick, I'll just go straight to the Virgin since that's what we worked on previously. Take a look at an estimate. All right. Now there's different regions in which resources can be created in Azure as like displayed here, right? And I'm going to change mine to the UK South. Okay, so and then also going to change the instance here if it'll let me. Actually, just going to type it. Hmm. Yeah, that's the one I want. Now, different as we can see, actually, before I continue, different virtual machine sizes have different costs. So a company can actually use the pricing calculator to estimate the amount of a specific virtual machine that is how much it's going to cost per month, depending on the resource utilization, of course. But I've chosen that one for my temporary storage, about 32 gigabytes of random access memory and 300 gigabytes of temporary storage, right? And then I'm going to scroll down to the estimated upfront cost, which USD, that's 651, 16, depending on the size of your organization, that's I would assume drop in a bucket, or I would hope that to be. And the currency can be changed to other types of currency to better understand the cost because this is globally, right? It's not relegated to just the United States. So for me, since I have the UK South, I'm going to actually change it to the UK for pounds, right? And we can see it's $513 £513 and 59 cents that it would actually cost for this particular VM instance that I'm looking at, right? So now I'm actually also going to investigate this for here, um, the Amazon Web Services calculator as well. Like so. All right, now, as I noted before, creating resources on a cloud store on the CSP, it involves a specific cost structure, right? So the all right. So a company that considers migrating its resources can use a cloud service provider's pricing calculator to determine estimated cost for resources, right? So what I'm going to do is use the price calculator for AWS to determine the cost for a resource being hosted on this particular platform. Um, if wants to load for me. So actually take a look here. Yeah, I'm going to take a look at the Elastic container, which is an EC2 instance. There it is. All right. Perfect. And for this region, I'm going to do actually what's the location? I'm going to do month. And the same with Azure, depending on the region that you reside in, you can change this accordingly. But I chose it because of, just to remain congruent. Now, from the specifications, let's take a look here. I'm going to change it to the Windows server. And several different OSs also are available with different price ranges. So a company can actually select, as you can see, specific OSs and estimate the cost per month for the operating system, right? And here, you can also choose the size. Let's see, for the memory, DIV, I'm going to do about 32, right? Then we can see the payment options, and it'll pretty much give us, 1 year, 3 years. It's a bit more, at least in my opinion, it's a bit more complex, but in a good way, right? As far as what the costs are, your settings, the configuration that you have to determine what the cost would be as far as any estimates, right? Good thing you don't have to pay up front. I personally had an Amazon account that I was doing a project on as far as creating some architecture for an AWS account. And it's actually, I mean, yeah, it was extremely small scale compared to a large enterprise of 500 to 1,000 employees, right? But actually fairly cheap, a lot cheaper than I anticipated it to be, because I actually left the instance running that I had for the project that I built, and it kept billing me, emailing me, sending me, because I actually set a notification for it to continue bill me once I crossed over the initial free amount, and then once I started getting billed, what would that look like? And it was fairly cool. It's actually pretty okay, but you can notice the price estimates, right? 453 a month. We didn't do as many configuration as we did with Azure, so I mean it's relatively cheap in comparison, um, right? To compare to the price that we saw there, as far as $600+ a month, it's quite a large amount. But nonetheless, we can move forward now alongside capacity planning, right? It's imperative to also to consider what performance is expected from a resource or infrastructure being developed on a cloud. Now, it's easy to in business environments to focus so much on capacity planning that resource planning takes a hit, or vice versa. But it's important to find a balance in between the two. Now, an infrastructure you have been instructed to build, it usually needs to have the resources, right, available to meet the needs and the objectives of the organization, um, while at the same time staying within agreed guidelines space, so it's not to exceed the budget, build resources that would not be underutilized. So what I'm going to do is now investigate how to plan resources when building them in a public cloud infrastructure specifically, right? So I'm actually going to start with Azure. Now, after using different tools to investigate this for both requirements for AWS and Azure, there are also considerations to take into account when building resources in a public cloud. So actually, let's start with creating a resource, right? And we're going to create a virtual machine. Going to open up the portal for us. Now, we're creating resources in a real world environment. Going to have to create a new RG to bundle all extra resources as part of the infrastructure into one place. For example, right, when creating a virtual machine, I'll also create a virtual network, right, a virtual network adapter, or VNIC, as we don't want to call it, or the acronym for it. Now, and also a subnet, which I'm going to actually showcase that. I can't wait to get to that video. I'm actually going to also showcase that as well in the future. Can't wait till I do that, because I've done it before and it was super fun. Now, which all, as far as the subnet and everything I just mentioned, virtual network, it's going to have all the associated costs. And with multiple RGs, you can analyze costs based on specific resource. Not that inside this environment, I may not be able to create a new RG, unfortunately. So I wish I could showcase that, but in another video, I will be able to. Now, let's take a look at, make sure the resource group is chosen, right? And we're going to select it. Now, this is an important factor, right, of ultimately affecting the cost of the infrastructure, because at some operating costs, or systems rather, would be more cost effective than others. But the OS that you choose should ultimately depend on the infrastructure that you're looking to create. Now, you should also consider, I would also consider what a role a device would have or should have when choosing an operating system, right? For example, a low utilization device, right? Like an older version of Microsoft Server or a Gen 1 image may be sufficient, provided it meets security requirements, or the most recent version may also be required if the opposite is true. So let's see, configure, configure. Now also, let me just make sure I use generation. Now it doesn't say it at first, but it actually does support it. It's fine. Now for immediately when selecting a resource group, I want to make sure I don't skip this. Now a policy will apply to state that the currently selected size is not compatible normally, right? That's because actually this is for the resource group for the OS that was just chosen. Or is it not? Here it is. Now, as I mentioned, initially it said that the current size is not compatible, right? That's because the Ubuntu server for Gen 2 doesn't support the SKU size and has been prohibited at least for this one. Now, in the real world scenario, which policies are applied and which OSs that are supported will differ. All right, so generation 1, so we're good there. Now, generation 1 images support most operating systems. Generation 2 images support most 64-bit versions of Windows, Linux, and like FreeBSD OSs. Now I've selected Gen 1. Now that I've selected the error message that appears under the size section, as you can see, it's not there anymore. So let's actually see all sides here. And we're going to go back pretty much to what we used before in the other video. A1, B2, general purpose. We're not doing anything crazy. Now, when considering performance planning for resources in a public infrastructure, it's imperative that the correct sizes are used when creating new resources, right? So typically, in a real world scenario, right, I would have specific requirements for what's needed from each resource, and I must ensure that the resource can meet these requirements. So some public cloud resources allow me to scale or would allow me to scale these resources as required. So SKU sizes are limited to the standard A1 V2 for generation 1 images for this environment that I have. Right. So let's actually actually before I do that, let me take a look at the networking. This wants to work today. Okay. Now I can see here in the virtual machine portal, I can also create a relevant, here. So normally you're able to create a relevant subnet, right? And virtual network, both of which have their associated costs, although comparatively a small cost. These should be considered when creating resources. So just trying to go through these here. It'll let me. Now here, I could enable or disable a system, assign, manage identity, or allocate a login. You can see here, linking log into this particular device, linking them up with the Azure directory or Active Directory, again, which has its own cost. So let me actually go back to the Azure dashboard, and everything is unsaved, but that's fine because we've reached the end of the video. Now for a brief recap of everything that we did go over, looks like it's my network is acting up on me. But nonetheless, we did, just for a brief recap, we went over cloud resource capacity planning and as far as the pricing calculator and everything that we need to look for whenever we're creating a cloud environment, as far as the intricacies of it and the associated costs that come with creating that cloud environment. So planning factors, pretty much, long story short, cloud density load and trends and performance planning as well, trend analysis, including baseline patterns and anomalies and things like that. It, depending on, again, what your needs are based on your business and your enterprise. So nonetheless, again, we reached the end of the video. Thank you for watching. If you're still here, can't wait to see you on the next video. We're actually going to be doing, looking at high availability and scalability in the cloud. Can't wait to see you there if you're going to watch. Until then, stay curious, stay secure.